selves like myself to get proper funding. But I believe we are the ones who really know the truth, you know. We are the ones who are really, who know our culture, who know our people, who can change our system. And while I've seen reports where widows are glossing expensive, you know, project reports, they are on the cover. But are they with the money? The cost of printing that report, glossy report, is enough to fund her, to sustain her 10 children for the next generation, you know. So it's all missing out. It's all...
Well, there's not a global plan, you know, and this is really what happened with Lord Lumbitz. He presented this because the Sustainable Development Goal number 5, empowering women and girls, is critical. He created this report because he said, if we do not actually empower the most vulnerable women, so let's just face it, widows fall into that category in most cases. We do not empower these vulnerable women, guess what?
Goal number 5.
Their children, their girls in particular, are going to become the most vulnerable children of the world. And you know what happens in that scenario? And it's already happening, and we know it is. Human trafficking. These girls become the wellspring of human trafficking. Okay, and
prostitution.
And it's so easy. It's so easy. You have a destitute, vulnerable mother who has nothing to offer except poverty and starvation, and someone comes along and offers an opportunity to a young girl, 11, 10, 11, 12. What is her option? Of course, the mother wants the best for her daughter, and she will let her go.
Yeah. And in Kenya, the widows marry off their firstborn daughters to bring wealth for their sons to get married. You know, so it's what I call the circle of widowhood. You get one man dying, you get HIV and AIDS, you get loss and grief, you get substance and alcohol abuse, and then you get prostitution or human trafficking at the end, and then you get more death. And it's just a circle. It's just a circle. And for this family to break this circle, there needs to be a major shift.
Huge.
You know, an intervention has to focus on this woman to bring that change within our household. And that is what is missing.
There's a whole revival of how widows are seen, how they're served, has to happen on every level around the world. Government, religious, and social, on every level. It will never change. If we can't change it in the United States, when we have the most powerful and most resources for the women right here in this country, you know, how is it going to happen? How will it happen?
Well, and I think what society is missing out on is widows like yourselves are some of the strongest females on earth. When you are able to embrace the loss that you have and make impact for others that are suffering.
That's right.
So what does being a widow advocate mean to you?
Well, the interesting thing is, I don't think you wake up one morning and go, I'm going to be a widow advocate. I don't think nobody wakes up even in dreams of as a child, I'm going to be a widow, period. So when I started first using the word widow advocate, you know, I would hashtag it because and on Twitter, it was never used. And I just went, how telling is that? When millions of people around the world talking about the most important, supposedly, topics on Twitter, and there's not one person hashtagging widow advocate. And so I realized at that moment, we have to create our own titles. Becoming a widow revolutionary. That's where we are now, right? But first we were widows, and then we were widow mentors, and then widow leaders, and then widow advocates, and then we're moving towards becoming just revolutionaries. Because that's just what it takes. You keep moving. You have to have a bigger global scale of thinking. But being a widow advocate, it's a big responsibility, but it's also fulfilling. So fulfilling to see so many women rise up, use their voice, realize their value, to know that everything they do matters. when their children are looking at them, when the community's looking at you. Widows are the most inspirational women. People think that me being around widows all the time must be sad and just overwhelming emotionally, and I'm like, no. It is the most inspiring group of women I have ever encountered. And I know that is so counterintuitive to what people think, but it's truth. So being a widow advocate to me is being this person that brings a voice for the voiceless, right? You do it in a very humble service of being human. That's what it means to me.
Wow, that's a big question, Gina. To me, what it means is making a taboo subject palatable, you know, putting a human face to a taboo subject, you know, speaking the unspoken.
The truth.
In a way that sits right in my soul, you know, and giving a voice and a face to women who would never, when I came out, there were no widow activists, there were no widow advocates. And I was called, abused terribly, almost getting killed in the middle of the night for saying I'm a widow activist. And it took a lot of courage and strength to normalize that name.
Yeah.
And now I'm way beyond that. I'm that and more, you know. Because so many of now, I think over 200 widow leaders in Kenya are calling themselves widow activists. Yep. It's because I normalized the name. I owned the name.
Yep.
And I remember going to a government meeting and being introduced as Roseline Orwa, a widow champion and activist. And one elected leader stood up and said, "Oh, you mean in this meeting we have widows? How did widows get inside here?" And I was ashamed. I almost was shaking. I almost left the boardroom, and yet I needed to be at that table. And then the next meeting, I said, "But sir, your mother is also a widowed woman. Would you have loved her not to be here?" And so I every time there was shame and stigma around this name, I would more or less turn it around, shift the conversation to how much that does the individual know about their own lives, which I only mirrored that. So making a taboo subject palatable. Death is a taboo subject in the African culture. Palatable and humanizing it is, even if today Carolyn Rona Foundation closed shop because of lack of resources, I would still feel I have achieved that. I normalized a taboo subject and gave it a face and a voice. And alongside it, worked some women to get their dignity and voices back. And that is priceless.
Yep.
That is priceless.
So how can Modern Widows Club and the Rona Foundation continue to collaborate and make a difference? And how can the viewers right now make an impact on our organizations?
Several ways. In the US here, some widows who are more stronger and more economically endowed than Carolyn, I think silence is a sin sometimes, you know. Speak up, even tweet, you know. And the other thing that I'm, particularly through the Modern Widows Club, is when you do visit us, it is one thing for us to, I'm lucky. I'm one of the lucky widowed rural women who are able to break the border barriers, you know, the visa issues, and to find myself here. These are poverty. The strings of poverty attached into breaking border barriers are real. You know, being born in Africa itself is itself another form of poverty. We did not choose where we are born.
Right.
You know, so it's easier for the community here of widows to visit us than us to visit them. You know, the exchange is priceless. The gains are equal. You know, and support the work that Modern Widows Club is doing, because when you support them, then we get supported through them, and support our work. That way we are able to get laws passed that will work to outlaw harmful cultural practices. We will support our projects and interventions and innovations to change attitude and behavior about widows. We'll support orphans to school. More widows will get houses, you know, and then just collaborate further and maybe build widow caucuses across the globe, hold events that bring more African widows together, you know, like what you've done here is only for the US, and I'm lucky to be here. What if we had more representation from Asia, from here? I mean, and then take that fire out into the world. Maybe in another 5 years, then we will be looking at a real change. We will be looking at policies. We will be looking at laws that work. We'll be looking at resources allocated. But that is going to take a concerted effort. But I think it starts here in the US. Here is where there is power. Here is where there is resources. Here is where there are more people with more power and voices and authority. And the place to start is here. And it's their call, really. We can only ask so much. And Caroline, thank you for having me. Really, really, really. It means so much to our widows at Rona Foundation that finally I get to represent, you know. I wish we could come 5-10 of us here to be here and meet the widows here, you know. But it's not possible. Resources are not there. Visa issues, you know. All these things matter, but it's easy for this group to visit us. And that way we are able to take these collaborations further and help us build our own sustainability, really. That is where I think we should take it further.
You know, and just to ask yourself, well, do self-study. You know, I always ask people, you know, well, go ask your place of worship. Go ask a widow that you know. Did you need anything? What was your experience like? Are these ladies telling the truth? Do your own research. You know, everything that we have created at Modern Widows Club and the Rona Foundation, it has come from translating truth from women's mouths to this format, right? So if everyone does their own, and those are some of our greatest advocates, is the people who have done that. They have gone out and done their own little self surveying of what is out there, and they're usually very shocked. It's almost as if we're literally like turning on a light on this subject, right? And you can't really see in the beginning, but then the more evidence that you gather, now you have some clarity. And what I have found is everyone who finds clarity in what's really happening in this stage of widowhood, it actually creates better relationships, because then people have different conversations when they aren't in widowhood. And so then you're more prepared for widowhood. The massive amount of education doesn't just help widows and their situations. It's a worldwide cultural needed conversation. And so just commit to being a part of a solution. You know, what would it look like if no widow was left behind? What would happen if your mother, your aunt, your daughter, your wife had something to go to where they were going to be so supported with life support and unconditional love, and protected from predators, which most people don't even comprehend that exists in your country and mine on different levels. What does it look like when you have someone who comes alongside and champions her? Will be her voice when she is voiceless. But I think most people don't. They see women like us, and they're empowered and they have big voices, right? But all of us were on the floor with no confidence, completely lost, full of fear, that moment that they became widowed, right? This is what we all have in common. We know that completely broken experience, right? And we're all tearing up just because we know that's it where we started. That's where we started. We were all there, right? And these are the women we are speaking up for. The women who continue to pour out tears because they aren't heard. Yes, that's what we're doing.
More honored to work with both of you.
and Gina, you know, even our critics, and I'm sure Caroline has critics too, you know, what I call onlookers, they forget that fact that we were on the floor, you know. I was divorced brutally at the age of 26. My home burnt, my business burnt to ashes. I lived on the street for 6 weeks. I was widowed at 32. I suffered cervical cancer at 35. I've tried to commit suicide more than 4 times by the age of 35. I have literally had only the blouse on I'm wearing and my identity, nothing else. I haven't had no home. So when our critics come and say, you're doing this for selfish gains, I've funded the Rona Foundation for 8 years out of my own pocket, inside my own home. What is there to gain out of these painful stories? Unless, this is not the place to criticize. This is not the place to say somebody is gaining nothing. There's nothing here to gain. This place has no resources. We are only putting our lives on the line so that change can happen. We are pioneers of our suffering along what God calls widows and orphans live to me. It was so difficult even for God himself. So here we are taking something so huge that God left for himself in our own hands. Our critics forget that fact, that we have been down and broken. And while arising, we are only asking, whom have we left behind, and pull that person alongside us. And that is why, and I believe it's true for you, Caroline, that's why we are doing what we are doing. And merely with nothing in our hands, but saying, if I healed, I made this step, let me bring one person alongside, because now I know who I am, and I can bring the next person, and the next, and the next.
I remember thinking, it should not be this hard to find a widow mentor for me. It should not be this hard to find someone that I can look up to and say, I want to be like her. Okay? Everybody wants that, right? It shouldn't have taken, as long as it did. And in a lot of ways, that's what we're creating, is this well in which to dip from that was built a long time ago, but it's available to any that wants to pull from it. It's very it's comforting, so comforting to me. And even when this year when I had some difficulties in my life and just professionally and physically, I had this community there for me, and I got to experience what I created. And it was this moment where I just went, oh, this is what it's like to come to Modern Widows Club. And it was just this beautiful moment where I went, yeah, this is good. This is really good. We need to do more of this. Yeah.
I think the depth of grief that we felt can also be the amount of joy.
Oh, yes.
That we spread.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Well, then we got a lot of really high thing to rebound from, because, I think all of our pain, the purpose in all of our pain, and all the women who are seeking that as well, all together in events like this and through our programs at Modern Widows Club. Yeah, it feels so good not to do something so alone. The isolation, I think the isolation and the loneliness is just a true hope killer for women. And if even reading a post on social media gets them through that day, we've done our job. Really, truly.
We've done our job, And we are sitting at a special place at the tip of that change, where other widowed women will, when several years they look at perhaps this interview and say, how did they do that? And they will have something to do together. It's difficult for women to work together. It's even more difficult for women to support women. But in my life right now, Caroline, I'm looking for those women who can support women, because really change driven by women is sustainable, and it's truthful, and it's honest. And not women who are looking at what is the cost of your necklace and how well is your blouse sitting and standing. This kind of women this is not for them. This is meant for women who want to help other women get better, heal better, and grow and thrive into the world and make change in their community. What I call, changing communities with widows as change makers. This is about that time.
Well, empowerment, Modern Widows Club is a growth and empowerment organization. We are not a grief organization. Grief comes with everyone that is attending and involved in it. It comes and goes, as we know that. But, the word empower is to give someone back control. And widowhood is such a it's an uncontrollable experience. You feel completely like everything has lost control, right? So empowering a woman and bringing certain elements, community, resilient role models, we know because we've been doing this now for 8 years that it's needed. Yeah.
And I think it's important for widows to understand, especially newly widows, that although you don't believe that you'll ever actually be happy again.
That's what you see. That's what you told me.
Although you don't believe.
You don't believe. That's right.
Yeah.
And seeing is believing, right?
Yeah.
When you met me, now you've met me in person.
Yeah.
It is it's an up-level experience, right? Okay, there's following them online, but then you meet them and you're like, oh my gosh, they're real people. They actually had a shower today. They put clothes on. They did something selfless for someone else. You know, when you start seeing these women actually do this and you know, rebuild their life. I mean, that's what's happening in widowhood. Rebuilding a whole life. It's very hard for people to comprehend. What would that look like if you had to rebuild your whole life? Like, there's not one area that is not touched by widowhood.
And I think that's why society ignores us, because it's easier not to have to think about
Absolutely.
And our stories are just what I call same, just a little different. Stigma is same, poverty is same, maybe just a little different, you know. Poverty of here is not poverty of no dollar a week. You know, we are just same. Widowhood gives you this same thing, hands you this same gift that you all have to maneuver around each other. And as you maneuver through it, and this is where leadership comes in, how do you also help others heal?
Yeah.
You know,
leadership is the answer. I mean, I really, after all the research, it's really 3-tiered, right? In order to serve widows, first of all, you have to have someone to listen to them, and those are leaders, right? You have to have leaders trained. And in order for leaders to be able to expand and have exposure and be able to create the awareness, you have to have advocates that open those doors for them, right? Or they're just gonna keep hitting closed doors.
True.
So you have to have those advocates that are opening up those avenues so those leaders can step into and that serve the widows, and then the widows choose, you know, what they want for their life to be as they've moved into a more empowering position. But I saw this huge gap where, well, why aren't widows being told they're great leaders, and why aren't they being trained, and why aren't they being chosen, right? And now we're doing that.
Yeah.
That's what we're here this weekend for.
What we can't ignore is that these numbers are only going to grow.
True.
Yeah, true. And the other factor to that is about leadership is sometimes when I meet with our widow leaders, I tell them, I know you really want to lead well, but this is an emotional type of leadership.
Yes.
I know the logical thinking and administrative is key, but don't forget this is an emotional subject. These women want to see your heart, and they want to see how your heart grow and expand.
That's right.
And through that, they will reason and have logical administrative issues. So when our widow leaders miss this too, then some groups really struggle. The group dynamics then begins to play because they think it is all logic, it is all, you know, administrative, it is all authority and power. It is not that. This is all emotional. This is more or less healing the soul and heart, and then marrying that for slowly to this person reawaken to find themselves and become this new person. So our leaders must also be very sensitive human beings. You know, our widow leaders are the core of this work. And their sensitivity to the subject and to the widow members is key, because they're also making fellow leaders. I've had groups where widow leaders are scared that another group has created. I said, can you really meet the needs of the widows all over the world?
No.
So what happens?
There could never be too few.
What would you lose if group A created group B and created group C? You know, what are you losing? You're not losing money. You're not losing. What are you really afraid of? So sensitivity.
It's selfless. It's a selfless act of service.
Yeah.
And when we come together and hear our voices in venues like this, we only become more powerful.
We only become more powerful. Wow.
Did you have any more questions?
I just want to thank you both.
Oh.
Thank you. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you,
you, Carolyn.
Thank you, Roseline.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really, from the bottom of my heart. Caroline, it is unlikely. It is unimaginable. It's not possible that a woman with the kind of life that I have had, at the bottom of nothing, from the street to widowed, to find myself here in the United States doing a podcast video with the greatest widow leader in the world. I'm a rural widow. I serve well in a rural setup. That's where I thrive. And to find myself in the world's topmost country amongst someone who's done this work for so many years. Many people wait to celebrate their heroes when they are dead, but truly you're my hero. You made the greatest difference in my life.
Thank you.
Without you, I would be dead. Thank you.
Well, we need you.
Thank you.
So
I am grateful.
Together we rise. Yes.
Thank you. God bless. You can only get better from here. Thank you.
Yes. Look forward to the work. Yeah, much work to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I look forward to seeing you both in Africa.
We'll try.
Thank you. Joy, did we make sense? Oh.